podcast. My guest today is none other than Steve Eimers. For those of you who aren't familiar, Steve lost his daughter Hannah in a guardrail crash in Tennessee, and was it 2019?
That was 2016, coming on 10 years.
2016.
Yep, 10 years this year.
And so since that time, he has been a guardrail safety advocate, a whistleblower, and has a wealth of knowledge about guardrails and how they're manufactured, how they should be installed. And so he's doing some great work. What we want to talk about today is Steve recently made a trip with several other families who were also victims of guardrail crashes to Washington, D.C. So won't you tell us about that trip, Steve?
So we set up some appointments just to talk about priorities related to guardrail legislation and the things that we hope to see in the bipartisan reauthorization of the highway bill. I had some language in the IIJA that it was signed into law by President Biden. It had been in Trump the first infrastructure bill related to crash testing integrity, but that was a first step. The second step was to take. We constantly want to be moving the football closer to the end zone, which would be zero highway deaths associated with guardrails. So, families from around the country joined me. One was Christy DiFilippo. Christy lost her son Hunter in a guardrail crash where the device was Frankenstein, installed upside down, a number of issues. Uh, Denise Fox, her son was killed when he hit a damaged and very extraordinarily obsolete product called the Turndown. He was speared. Uh, a young man by the name of oh goodness, why am I drawing a blank? But the crash was out in Arizona, and they hit the guardrail. It was improperly installed. It was also compromised crash testing, and Jet Weinstein and his friend Jackson Elliott. Jackson was killed. His life was saved, and Jet was with me in D.C. This is a young man who actually he was saved. You're a Marine. There was a convoy of soldiers, and they placed a tourniquet on Jet's leg and saved his life. But we were joined there. My sister joined me. My wife came along, and we just shared these stories with various congressmen and senators. From Congressman Cohen, who is extraordinarily considered on the left, to Congressman Hamadeh, who is on the right. Very receptive 20, 30-minute meetings. Senator Mark Kelly, and Senator Blumenthal, Senator Van Hollen, Senator Haggerty, Senator Blackburn. So we had some very good meetings, and those before that I'd actually gotten to go out on the road site and inspect guardrails like what I do, like what you do, Stuart, with Congressman Tim Burchett, who's on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the United States Congress.
All right. I'm glad you mentioned all those folks that attended with you, because I think part of the problem is, a lot of folks don't understand how dangerous guardrails are, and how frequently this type of crash happens. And so, and they're happening in every state. I was recently in Pennsylvania on a business trip, and you mentioned the approach in turn down guardrails. They were everywhere in Pennsylvania. And then I, in fact, reported them and just got an email about an hour and a half or so ago from PennDOT saying, hey, we're going to address some of these issues.
Good.
But it's not a one-off thing.
Oh no.
These guardrail crashes are happening frequently, and they're probably in every state, and you know more than I do.
So yesterday, you sent me a crash. I think it was outside, or it was in Sacramento. It was, it's a guardrail crash, but what they did was installed what essentially is a handrail in the clear zone, and it's obvious that the handrail penetrated the passenger compartment of that vehicle. A non-crash worthy object in the clear zone caused a fatality yesterday in California. And moving back to Pennsylvania, there was a video posted. I'm still tracking down the details. Fortunately, these are minor crashes. Jada's crash, your daughter's crash, my daughter Hannah's crash. They were minor crashes, but for the guardrail going through the vehicle. So,
Right,
in this Pennsylvania crash yesterday, very, very similar circumstances to what our children experienced, my daughter and your daughter, but nobody was hit, but the vehicle was fully impaled. That's two crashes in one day on the left and right side of the country. So
right,
this is a daily occurrence. It's not like a one-off. Oh well, Stuart or Steve won the worst lottery ever. No, this is happening on a daily basis to some family somewhere in the United States of America.
right. And this is why we do what we do, because until Jada's crash, it never occurred to me, and I've been driving since I was 16, that a guardrail would go through a car and be the instrument of death versus the protection of life. I never thought that would ever happen. And so this is why I, and I'm sure you, are trying to create more awareness around this issue.
Yeah, it should be abnormal, and the reality is this is a common occurrence.
Common occurrence.
People want to take a look and say, "Oh well, this is just Stuart. This is not just Stuart and Steve." The reality is, if you look at the NHTSA data, in the last 15 years, there have been about 14,000 fatal crashes involving a guardrail in the United States. I'm not saying that's causative in every single one of those instances, but we're talking a death toll that is what uh, uh, more than 6, 7 times what were killed on 9/11.
Right,
I mean, we essentially have a 9/11 with guardrails every 3 years.
right. Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. So let's get back to your trip to Washington.
Yep.
How receptive were the elected officials that you met with?
Well, I felt like we had a great audience with the first visit was with Congressman Steve Cohen, very receptive. Not one of us was a voting constituent, but this issue does not know boundaries, and Steve was great and was providing feedback, very engaged. Then we met with Congressman or Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, one of the only senators or congressmen that is a engineer. And the meeting with Kelly was astonishing because I had an email. It discussed what would happen. It was an internal email from one of the companies, and it discussed what will our liability be when the rail folds over and spears the passenger compartment. I also gave him some this side up stickers, and when Hannah was killed, the first and third post were interchanged. And when Kelly's legislative director went to take that email and those two stickers from him, the this side up sticker and the post one sticker, he said, "No, I'm holding on to these." We connected with Senator
Right,
Kelly. Senator Van Hollen was incredible. Chris was a huge supporter when the Senate flipped in 2021. I needed a new priority requester. Senator Van Hollen stepped up. Senator Blackburn, Senator Haggerty in Tennessee, two very conservative members of the Senate, very supportive of this idea. Congressman Burchett, what can you say? The guy went out on the field with me looking at guardrails. This is an issue that does not know partisan lines. And we saw wholesale support, I believe, for essentially IKEA for guardrails. We're going to make sure, like, we're going to get these things in the ground right. We're going to study what's working.
Right. Good.
And that's really what we see in that bipartisan Build America 250 act that was introduced by Congressman Sam Graves and then Congressman Larson out of Washington.
Okay. And how has your meeting affected that bill?
Well, you never quite know. I can see language that is within that bill that, well, I had somebody within the industry, a very senior executive, who reached out to me and he said, your fingerprints are all over that bill. And I can see a couple things in particular related to guardrail manuals and the fact that they have to be updated. Well, I filed a whistleblower affidavit related to the death of my daughter Hannah, and related to the fact that outdated manuals or manuals that are not plainly read were being used, and this bill requires that the manuals be kept updated and that they be written in plain, understandable language that these people on the front lines are going to understand. None of this technical nonsense. They're gonna have the tools, literally and figuratively, to put these in the ground right. So,
And I think that's a good point because if anybody has ever had to put together a piece of furniture at home, you almost always have extra parts, which means you probably did not put the furniture together properly. And that's what's happening out on the roadways. Guardrails are not being installed properly because the directions, and correct me if I'm wrong, the directions aren't clear and easy to read and understand.
the directions, I mean, I go back to my early days in high school or in creative writing in college, and you'd be given a task to say, write out how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then we'd take those instructions and then we'd get up in front of the class and have to follow the directions exactly how they were written. And you would see some people that you'd end up reaching into the jar of peanut butter and using your hand because that's what they said. And you followed their instructions. Your plain reading of it was confusing as all get out. And the idea was to refine your descriptive writing skills.
Right.
And if we saw the value of that in just an introductory college course or high school course on creative writing, we've got to see how important this is when lives are at stake on the roadside.
Right. You know, you had mentioned also a few minutes ago about, and it, I done forgot my train of thought right quick, which always happens. It made me think of, you mentioned the turn downs.
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing that I was in this one particular county in Pennsylvania, and I was shocked at the number of turn down, approach and turn down guardrails. How long have those been obsolete in the United States?
In 1970.
Wow,
I
50
I am,
years.
yeah. I am 50 years old this year. Longer than I've been alive. I have guidance stating these are dangerous.
Right. And another thing I was able to document is, and I want to ask if the language you presented when you was in Washington would address this. In rural areas, I'm originally from West Virginia. I was born and raised there in a rural area, and I was just reinforced to me when I was in rural Pennsylvania that the guardrail infrastructure is dilapidated. It's rusted out.
Yeah.
Is
It's
there, go ahead.
so one of the things we were pushing were straight block grants. Now, HISIP, which is a funding mechanism that used by the Federal Highway Administration, has been expanded. But what you described, I didn't see that language make it directly into the Infrastructure Act that I was looking for, because what I see, in our rural, very, very rural communities and our very, very urban, most urban communities, our cores in our cities, like say Milwaukee or Chicago, that these areas that don't necessarily have the strong political pull, uh, they're ignored. And we
Right.
see a lot of unnecessary deaths involving very obsolete guardrail and other infrastructure in our core urban centers and then in our very rural communities.
Right.
They're forgotten areas of our country.
Absolutely. And if folks like you, and to a lesser degree myself, and other victims of this type of crash, if we don't make Americans aware that this is an issue, they'll never know. Their family member will be involved in a crash. It will either have a rusted out or dilapidated or obsolete or damaged or improperly installed guardrail, and they will never know it because nobody's going to tell them that from the state or from the city. The accident investigators aren't going to put that information in there. Is that something also that you talked about when you were in Washington, or no?
We didn't have a chance to talk about that, but that's one of the things that when I'm posting these videos, I think it's when you're posting these videos, we're trying to get a bee in the bonnet of people that have lost a loved one. Just ask. Just be a little more curious about, like, how did this happen?
Right.
And you may find something that's not so pretty underneath that little patina there. I just met a young father, Malachi. He had a crash in Texas. Really, it was interesting. It was like, I was going to say a mini me, but he's a lot bigger than me. But he was curious. He wanted to get to how did I end up in this swamp, literally, with a bunch of alligators, and how did this happen? How was this lethal infrastructure on the roadside? And we need all our families. Life has inherent value. If you lose somebody, this is basically when you hire an attorney or where you do this investigation. It's a post-mortem. It's like an autopsy of the crash.
Right.
My daughter Hannah, one of her favorite books, it came out of Tennessee, is very big. The University of Tennessee, Dr. Bill Bass, has infrastructure, or not infrastructure, forensics. And there's a book called Dead Men Do Tell Tales. And that's what we need to realize, is that the dead, Hannah Imers, Jada Payne, those crashes tell a story. And it's vital. It's vital that we examine that story.
Right. And so my advice to any family out there, if your child or someone else in your family or family friend is involved in a crash, you've got to demand the details. Even though you may not want to hear the gory details, you've got to demand them. Otherwise, an injustice will be imposed upon your family. And, and we say in Jada's case, they got away with murder. They murdered our daughter on the highway.
So just the other day, our local district attorney indicted a man. Came into a slowed down traffic in a tractor trailer, hit a pickup that was launched across the road, and hit a couple from Texas head on Interstate 40, and the couple from Texas was killed. Both of them were killed, and they rightfully indicted the truck driver for a vehicular homicide. I pulled a post, and what kind of disgusts me is that I'm going to provide exculpatory evidence for somebody who I do believe actually committed murder,
Right.
because the cable barrier that protected the median was down. That crash would not have been a fatal incident but for the cable barrier being down. They say pass through the median. Well, how did he pass through the median? Was the Tennessee DOT failed to repair that guardrail. So basically, what I would say is there can be two bad guys in a situation. I just did a story out in Las Vegas. DUI. The driver tampered with the materials that would shut off the car and prevent him from driving. But the guardrail was installed wrong too. There can be two bad guys in a situation.
Right.
And going back to your point about this goes way beyond guardrail. I'd tell anyone who lost somebody suddenly in the hospital, get to the bottom of what, I mean, was there medication error? A death in custody? Was there something untoward with how your loved one was treated in custody? I don't care how they died. Just get answers for, like, how did this happen? How did
Right.
this happen? I have a family that I'm not just contacted by those that have lost someone in a guardrail crash. This was an apparent self-harm incident. Well, when the coroner took a look, the shot came from the back of the head. He didn't
Right.
do it himself. It has to be a homicide. So ask those questions, whether it is a guardrail crash or whether, ask the questions. You may not find what you found or what I found. It may be as simple as what they said. Or there could be something really ugly under that surface when you scratch it.
Absolutely. I want to go back to the visit,
Yes.
and I know it's small bites at a time. Get a win
Absolutely.
here, and then keep pursuing and get another win. So, are you planning another trip in the near future?
I got my bottle of John Kennedy water, and we're hoping to meet with Senator Kennedy. Was stuck in a floor vote, so we didn't get to meet with Senator Kennedy. And so probably the next visit that we'll do is in Baton Rouge with Senator John Kennedy, just looking for additional support to uh, I, one thing I've learned is when I was working in New York, I was going to work with my friend Andrew Cuomo. When I was working in Tennessee, I was going to work with my friend Bill Haslam. I owe my fidelity not to a political party on this issue. It's very narrowly focused. I am going to work with anyone, anywhere, any place. I had some people recently call me out. It's funny. They'll call me out because, like, well, why did you, this person followed you? I'm like, oh, I mean, I don't, not going to vet every single person that I follow or that follows me and have some kind of political litmus test. I owe my fidelity to every last person to do what I can.
Right. Real quick, I want to transition. You and I have been speaking about an effort that I'm going to pursue here in the next couple of days. I was, I'm retired from the military.
Yeah.
Some folks may not know that. And so I was on Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton again yesterday. And those guardrails that we discussed several months ago, one has been damaged for well over a year. But my most recent documents of them was about 2 months ago, and they're still damaged.
So
And so
failure of the commander.
Absolutely.
He has a basic duty to protect his soldiers, his sailors, his Marines, and he is outright failing them. We saw four Camp Pendleton Marines die on a Caltrans roadway when they were incinerated. We saw PFC Michael Carter. I've kneeled graveside with a Gold Star mom in Arlington whose son was speared by a guardrail, not by some IED in Iraq. It was installed by an American company.
Right.
And so that this is happening on Camp Pendleton, I just filed an whistleblower action, which has been taken and transferred to the audit department of the Tennessee Valley Authority, another federal branch of the government. One of the things I am pushing, I did some audits by satellite looking at Google Street View. I've gotten to the point where I can identify issues from a satellite at the nuclear repository, Oak Ridge Y12, the nuclear weapons repository in the United States. I can see blunt end guardrails and untreated guardrails on that. I can't go in there because I don't have a Q clearance. I don't have that level of access. But using satellite imagery from Google Earth, I can see that there are issues at DOE. I can see there are issues at DOD. I can see there are issues with the NPS, with USDA, with the National Forest Service. Anywhere there's guardrails,
There's
there
issues.
seems to be issues.
Yeah.
And that our federal government, that I was looking at TVA guardrails that were installed in the 50s and are missing bolts. This is unconscionable. But Camp Pendleton, this is, I mean, this is the tip of the spear. If I am going to fight a war, I'm having guys come out of Fort Campbell. I'm having guys come out of Camp Pendleton. And they're the first in. They're the tip of the spear. And to think that they could die at the tip of a spear by being gored by a guardrail, that's disgusting. And that should shock the conscience of every American. We should have Pete Hegseth out there with his wrench fixing him if that's what has to be done.
Right.
Because we don't need, and I mean, and I don't want to just single out Hegseth. Austin was there for a long time. Why were these obsolete guardrails left there for decades? Let's step back even further to Trump the first. You go into the Obama administration. This has been a decades-long dereliction of duty.
Yeah. And I think the problem is the reporting structure is broken. When these incidents occur, and to give you a perfect example, I'm on my way back from Camp Pendleton yesterday, and along Interstate 15, there's a stretch from Temecula to Marietta where there were 3 damaged guardrails that I had reported 3 times to Caltrans. And as I'm coming back yesterday, all 3 of them were repaired.
Good.
A half a mile down the road, there's another guardrail that's newly damaged.
The issue is now, like, we have these smartphones. Blinksy and others are using AI to scan our roadside. The reality is, this could be, we could incentivize our guardrail contractors, incentivize it like Uber. If you find it, you get to fix it.
Right.
Document it, get it to Caltrans, and create a competition. Create a race to the top, because right now we have a race to the bottom.
To the bottom. Yeah, absolutely.
And so
Race to the bottom.
race to the bottom.
And they've got their contracts. It's for tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on where you are and how big the contract
Exactly.
is. And they move slow. They're not incentivized to move fast. And I want to ask you about the Utah crash. I'm pretty sure it was in Utah, but it might not have been, where somebody hit the guardrail, and 6 hours later, somebody else hit the same guardrail.
Yeah, that I call that the hand of an angel crash.
Right.
You know,
And what was this?
somebody
What was the difference there? Why did the second person that hit that
the,
guardrail survive?
well, no, well the second person that hit that guardrail is the one that it was damaged, and then 6 hours later it impaled. So what happened in that crash is Utah is one of the few departments that will scramble a truck mounted attenuator.
Right.
The TMA didn't get to the location. It was about 30 minutes out when the second crash took place. And there was a nurse that got in there, and there's this iconic picture of her just holding just sitting in there and just holding her arm and keeping her calm. And they did get her out, and she lived. But the key is the placement of that truck mounted attenuator, or the placement of
Water barriers, sand
something,
barriers,
something
something.
to mitigate the hazard, fixing it. Or unfortunately, in a couple situations that I've seen in Utah, the thing that would have fixed it is to unclog the drain across the street that was causing the series of crashes. We were seeing hydroplaning crashes. So I have one of those too out there.
I'm glad you brought that up, because, I get people, I'm sure you get them as well, making comments about, well, just don't hit the guardrail. Don't be speeding. Don't be texting, whatever. And most of these crashes don't involve texting, drinking, or anything else. It's a deer running across the highway, or construction debris in the road, or a clogged drain that hasn't been cleared. It's always something else other than malicious activity by the victim.
There could be any number of causes to a crash, and the victim, they should be 100% responsible for whatever percentage that they're responsible for. But the DOT, the asset owner, the person that maintains the asset or installs it, they're also 100% responsible for their own actions. And like
Right.
going back to the Tennessee homicide, the guy that hit them from behind and set off the chain of the events, yes, I think he's a murderer. His actions were reckless. He killed two people. But what about the total lack of repair that also allowed that crash to become deadly? I think that person was reckless. I think he committed murder. And that we can differentiate and say, well, this portion of it is, that's okay, but this portion is not. That
Yeah.
doesn't work that way.
Right.
All parties. And plus, the other thing is, we aren't putting these out there for stupid human tricks and Darwinian evolution. We're putting them out there because we know that people leave the roadway. Why they leave the roadway is not our concern. That they leave the roadway and we have a hazard. We're going to deal with those other factors on the back end. If they were driving drunk, we're going to arrest them. We're going to charge them, and we might even send them to jail. But we aren't going to summarily execute them with an improperly installed or a damaged guardrail or a defective guardrail or a fraudulent guardrail. That's not how we do things in America.
Right. And the same should be true for the contractors. If the
Absolutely.
contractor improperly installs a guardrail, they should be responsible. If they
Let's-
put it
yeah.
upside down, which happens, they should be responsible. If they don't respond in a timely manner, which is most often the case, which is why I bring up that Utah crash, 6 hours later, not 6 weeks later, not 6 months later, 6 hours later, Utah was responsible, mobilized the TMA, and it still didn't get there in time.
We'll have situations where we don't get there in time. We're a
Right.
few seconds late. But in Jada's crash, they were weeks late. In Hannah's
much so.
crash, that thing was improperly installed for the better part of 2 years. I mean, we're not talking most of the time. Those one-off Utah crashes. There was another one in Texas where it was 3 hours. There was another crossover incident, triple fatal. Those immediate crashes where we're 3 hours, 6 hours. Those are exceptionally rare, and I still think we can do something to deal with them. We can always get better, but we have many crashes that are staying damaged for days, weeks, months, and even years. The Marines that we talked about earlier, we're talking about a damaged location that was that way for 6 years.
Right.
They had time. They had time. I could have driven a crew from Tennessee to California and fixed that guardrail, gotten back, and had years. Years.
Right. So what's next for your next step, Steve, as far as your advocacy goes?
So I'm just working on this, trying to support the infrastructure bill, the Build America 250 bill, to make sure we get sections 1307, 1308 passed into federal law. Offered you to testify today, and any other family, any of my other families, that we're prepared to go to Congress and testify before that T&I committee or EPW if necessary. Continuing to push this issue of federal government guardrails that are owned, whether it's on DOD or TVA or DOE, making sure the feds have the money. We've got to give them the want. Working on some concerns. I think we talked about this briefly on the phone. Was crashworthiness involving ALPRs, license plate readers, flock cameras, Motorola, Axon, whatever. I stumbled into this issue where I found that we had devices going out onto the roadside that were different from as crash tested situations.
And that's with the flock cameras?
Flock, I've seen some issues with the Motorola cameras too, where they're not being installed in a crash-worthy manner. Being on the roadside is not a right; it's a privilege, especially when you're going in under an excess land use license. So, really pushing that, trying to stay in my lane of crashworthiness, not trying to get into the Fourth Amendment fight, but really focused on that crashworthiness. And so you can never scale, I use this term often, don't scale your mistake. Flock crash tested that post at the Texas A&M University, at the TTI crash test lab. They have a crash-worthy system. They're just installing it in a lethal way. And throw out the Fourth Amendment concerns just for a moment. This is just Stephen Stewart talking about crashworthiness. I don't want to talk about the Fourth Amendment and issues and abuse of authority that can come with Flock or anybody accessing records they don't have a right to access.
Correct.
We have put thousands of these devices on the roadside, and they are not being installed properly. When they're within 4 feet of that lateral deflection zone, I've seen the emails. I've seen the design drawings. The other concern I have is that a lot of these devices are being installed with permission, not from a professional engineer, not through a rigorous process of going through a qualified products list review, but by some administrator, some bureaucrat who just simply says, okay, we need to treat this with the same seriousness and sobriety that we're treating other roadside safety hardware. We've all got to play by the same rules.
Right. All right. Well, of course, I'm following everything you post, and so I found the flock cameras interesting because they actually have some in my community. Our
For that
HOA
slip,
installed them.
look for that slip plate. That slip plate's not there, and it's not behind a guardrail, 4 feet behind a guardrail. We've got a real issue. We've got a device that could spear someone and kill them.
Wow.
And
That's-
and I'm gonna step back. I want to mention my wife grew up with a young man, Sean Dodge. Sean was speared by a post in Tennessee that was not crash worthy. It went right through his head, killed him instantly. His mom is now in hospice. And what I was doing a story up at WGME in Maine, and they said, "Well, is this a real problem?" And I'm like, "Yeah. This issue of a crash-worthy post is the same thing as a non-crash-worthy guardrail. If you're in the clear zone, you must be crash-worthy." And so I've seen some positive stuff coming from Garrett, the CEO of Flock, with words. Those words have got to get to the roadside and get this issue corrected. And so the proof's going to be in the pudding. Just how that.
Right.
How.
All right, Steve. Well,
Stuart,
I
good catching
appreciate
up
you
with
jumping
you.
on.
Let's talk again soon.
You got it.
All right,
All
talk
right.
to you later. Bye.
Talk to you soon.